Imagine a royal court where beneath magnificent crowns there were not real hair but carefully dyed locks or entire clouds of wigs, where beauty could cost a life, and a single wrong move could make a head burst into flames from a candle. Yes, this truly happened, and no one was surprised. Imagine monarchs who secretly colored their beards, hid their gray hair with poisonous mixtures, coated their skin with dangerous solutions just to look younger and more powerful than they really were. Imagine queens climbing onto palace rooftops and lying for hours under the sun to turn themselves into perfect blondes, risking burns, poisoning, and hair loss, yet willing to do absolutely anything for beauty. Imagine an era when huge snow-white wigs, heavy as sin and suffocating as a torture chamber, hid beneath them, led base dyes, parasites, and foul-smelling oils. And all of this was considered the height of fashion. Imagine a time when the color of a monarch's hair meant more than laws, armies, and gold, when bluish and pinkish shades symbolized power, luxury, and distance from ordinary people, and when the hairstyles themselves posed a threat to health, finances, and reputation. And now imagine that all of this is true, a documented history concealed behind the gloss of royal portraits, behind ceremonial brilliance and cold majesty. If you think you know what European monarchs looked like, then you have never heard what was actually happening on their heads. And right now, you will learn all of it, step by step, all the way to the most shocking finale, when monarchs suddenly abandoned all this madness of beauty and splendor, and did so for very serious reasons. Keep watching, you will definitely want to hear every detail. In the very beginning of the history of European beauty, when power still smelled of Roman incense, hair became an almost sacred instrument of politics, intrigue, and personal survival. Ancient empresses already understood that sunlight could transform an ordinary woman into an ideal, and an ideal into a symbol of power. So they spent hours under blazing rays, coating their hair with mysterious Venetian infusions made from herbs, minerals, and rare oils, mixtures that could burn the scalp, cause hair loss, and leave painful irritation, but in return, granted a shining light shade considered the pinnacle of Roman beauty. Emperors at that time were no different because men also needed to preserve their power through their appearance, so they secretly colored their gray strands, hiding signs of aging with thick dark pastes made from lead, ash, and plant extracts, substances that seeped into the skin, poisoned the body, and caused headaches. Yet no one dared to question it because gray hair symbolized weakness, and weakness in Rome was almost equal to political suicide. Light hair in Rome carried an almost magical meaning, associated with northern tribes and with a mythical vision of purity, youth, and nobility. So high-born women and men strove to achieve a golden-haired appearance that emphasized their right to rule, their chosen status, and their elevated position. Some historians claim that even the great Gaius Julius Caesar, the man who shaped the fate of nations, was suspected of coloring his hair to appear younger, more confident, and closer to the ideal Roman, crafted not by nature but by social expectation and fashion. And women prepared complex mixtures of crushed flowers, aromatic resins, eggs, vinegar, and ash, applied them to their hair, and sat beneath the open sky, sometimes for an entire day, to achieve the desired shade, and many of them later suffered from burns, hair loss, breakage, and skin ailments. Yet they never stopped, because beauty was valued above safety. Men, trying to hide their gray hair, used black and dark brown pastes that could penetrate the pores and slowly poison the body, but to refuse these procedures meant openly showing the arrival of age, and aging meant losing authority. Court hair dyers, the people who kept the intimate secrets of many emperors and empresses, risked their lives, because even a hint that the ruler colored his hair could cost them their heads. Since appearance was not simply vanity, it was a weapon, a political statement, and a tool for holding on to power. Even Roman poets and philosophers, who often criticized such practices, admitted that light hair possessed a special charm that strengthened one's position in society, making a person more noticeable and appealing to the crowd. And all of this, from sun rituals to deadly dyes, existed not for beauty as such, but for an image, for an illusion, for a carefully constructed facade meant to conceal fear, age, vulnerability, and human fragility. It was here, in ancient Rome, that hair first became a weapon, and from here begins the entire incredible history of royal beauty that would continue to shock the world for many centuries. In the shadowed centuries of the medieval world, when the church declared cosmetics a sinful vanity and warned that altering one's appearance tempted the wrath of heaven, queens continued to pursue beauty with a mixture of fear, secrecy, and unwavering determination. For in their world, golden hair was not merely an ornament. It was a sign of divine favor, a mark of purity, a shimmering halo that separated chosen women from the common crowd. They retreated into private chambers guarded by loyal attendants, where candles flickered against stone walls and whispered rituals unfolded in silence, where jars of powders, oils, and pigments lay hidden beneath silk cloths, waiting to be transformed into dangerous elixirs of brightness. They mixed henna with crushed herbs, ground saffron with fragrant blossoms, and added drops of mysterious liquids brought from distant lands, liquids that promised radiance, but carried within them something far more sinister. For among these ingredients, there were often traces of lead, arsenic, and other deadly minerals, substances capable of slowly poisoning the body while giving the hair a glow worthy of legends. Many queens knew, or at least suspected, that these mixtures could harm them, yet they continued, because beauty was more than a personal desire. It was a political tool, a sacred duty, a veil of perfection needed to maintain authority in courts filled with suspicion and ambition. Golden hair had become a symbol so deeply rooted in myth and poetry that appearing without it could weaken a queen's image and therefore her influence. Behind closed doors, attendants applied the warm henna pastes to royal hair, wrapped it in linen soaked with herbal infusions, and whispered prayers that the church would never learn of these forbidden rites. For discovery meant public shame, punishment, or accusations of witchcraft. The mixtures burned the scalp, left red patches on the skin, caused dizziness, nausea, and trembling of the hands. Yet queens endured these torments with quiet strength. During the radiant yet merciless era of the Renaissance, when beauty became a form of art and art became a form of power, Venetian aristocrats pursued the perfect shade of blonde with a devotion that bordered on obsession, transforming their bodies into canvases and their rooftops into sunlit studios. High above the bustling canals and echoing plazas, noblewomen climbed onto the terracotta roofs of their palaces, carrying bowls filled with elaborate brightening mixtures, each crafted according to secret recipes whispered from mother to daughter, mistress to servant, alchemist to noble patroness. These mixtures, silky in appearance yet dangerous in essence, contained aromatic herbs, fermented flowers, crushed minerals, and caustic ingredients capable of burning the skin with terrifying ease. But the women used them willingly, spreading the liquid across their hair with delicate precision, shaping the strands as though sculpting gold from living fiber. They positioned themselves beneath the relentless Venetian sun, reclining on silk cushions or woven mats, allowing the heat to penetrate the mixture until their hair began to shift from deep copper or chestnut tones toward the coveted pale radiance known as the Venetian blonde, a color the poets described as sunlight captured in silk, a color that painters immortalized on canvas, a color that elevated its wearer from mere mortal to living artifact. As they lay there, sometimes for hours, sometimes for the entire afternoon, the intense heat combined with the chemical strength of the mixture created a tingling discomfort that could grow into burning pain. Yet the women did not rise, because beauty in this age demanded not only effort but also endurance, and they understood that the result, the luminous shimmering of transformed hair, was a treasure more valuable than ease or safety. Servants moved quietly around them, adjusting parasols to protect their skin while leaving their hair exposed, bringing cool drinks, watching for any sign of faintness or distress, for the rooftop rituals were not entirely safe, and more than one noblewoman had collapsed beneath the sun's unforgiving blaze. Still, no amount of danger could stop the trend, because in the Renaissance, appearance was destiny, and golden hair became a symbol of nobility, refinement, and cultural superiority. Portraits of the time revealed the extent of this passion, showing aristocratic women with hair so pale it seemed almost translucent, glowing like halos against the rich fabrics of their gowns, creating an otherworldly impression that painters emphasized and patrons celebrated. These women became living masterpieces, admired in salons, courtyards, and ballrooms, their hair considered a form of aesthetic expression equal to sculpture or frescoes. The cost, however, was severe. The solutions they used could eat through the outer layers of the skin, leaving redness, sores, and permanent sensitivity. Some women lost entire sections of their hair after repeated treatments. Others developed chronic scalp pain, yet the pursuit continued, fueled by competition, vanity, and a cultural belief that beauty was a divine gift worth any sacrifice. In this era, a pale head of hair was not simply fashionable. It was a proclamation of status and discipline, a visual declaration that the woman wearing it was refined, cultured, and willing to suffer for the exquisite art of being admired. Thus, on the rooftops of Renaissance Venice, under the gilded sky and suffocating heat, the noble women of the time endured discomfort, danger, and pain to become living embodiments of perfection, radiant symbols of an age that worshipped beauty above all else. During the flamboyant age of the Renaissance, when appearance became a currency of influence and power, men of high rank embraced the art of coloring their beards with a zeal that rivaled the beauty rituals of queens and noblewomen, creating a world where masculinity was measured not only by strength or authority, but by the vividness and sophistication of one's facial hair. Kings, dukes, and powerful courtiers experimented with an astonishing range of shades, from fiery copper to deep midnight black, and even rare reddish-gold blends that shimmered in torchlight like living metal, each shade chosen carefully to craft an illusion, to sculpt a public image that spoke louder than decrees or speeches. Renaissance society believed wholeheartedly that a strong beard signaled a strong ruler, and therefore the bolder the color, the greater the perceived authority, transforming the act of dyeing into a political performance carried out in secret chambers, where mixtures brewed like potions in the hands of trusted servants and alchemists. Men who wished to project youth, vitality, and unshakable vigor applied bright youthful tones, even when age had begun to claim silver strands, while others, seeking to appear imposing or fearsome, darkened their beards to near blackness, creating a contrast that gave their faces an intensity almost theatrical. Some rulers took the practice even further, applying multiple shades at once, layering subtle gradients of red, brown, and gold to add depth and volume, hoping to deceive the eye and reshape their features into something stronger, sharper, more commanding. These mixtures, much like the beauty concoctions used by women of the same era, were far from harmless, for many dyes contained corrosive minerals, metallic compounds, or acidic plant extracts that burned the skin, irritated the eyes, and left lingering sensations of heat or numbness. Yet the men endured these discomforts without complaint, believing that the transformation of their beards would reinforce the transformation of their reputations. In dimly lit grooming chambers, attendants carefully painted the dyes into each strand using small brushes or combs, blending shades with an artist's precision, while the nobleman sat motionless, aware that a single mistake could leave a blotch, a streak, or an embarrassing patch that would expose the entire secret, for the public was never to know that their rulers' colorful beards were not gifts of nature, but products of meticulous and sometimes painful maintenance. Portrait painters, privy to these hidden practices, adjusted their palettes accordingly, emphasizing the rich pigments in the facial hair of their patrons, making beards appear fuller, darker, more radiant, and more symbolic of virility and command, and thus amplifying the illusion that the dyes themselves had begun. Court gossip often revolved around the changing shades of a ruler's beard, though such conversations were conducted in whispers to avoid accusations of disrespect, and servants who handled the dyes lived in constant fear of revealing too much, for the truth about a monarch's beard could undermine the carefully crafted aura of perfection. In this era, masculinity itself became an art form, painted stroke by stroke, shade by shade, with every color serving as a declaration of identity, ambition, and dominance. The Renaissance beard, brilliant, sculpted, and tinted with purpose, was more than a fashionable detail. It was a symbol forged from vanity, politics, and the relentless human desire to appear powerful, even at the expense of comfort, honesty, and health. In the extravagant and theatrical world of the 17th century, when appearances ruled courts and reputation could crumble under a single misplaced detail, the rise of Louis XIV brought with it a beauty revolution so dramatic that it reshaped an entire era. The young monarch, later immortalized as the Sun King, suffered an unexpected loss of hair early in life, a circumstance that might have humiliated a lesser ruler. Yet Louis transformed this vulnerability into one of the most powerful fashion movements in European history. Instead of hiding in shame, he summoned the finest wig makers, artisans, perfumers, and tailors, commanding them to craft a creation that would not merely conceal his baldness, but redefine the very image of royal power. The result was the birth of enormous powdered wigs, towering, curling, billowing structures that soon became synonymous with majesty, discipline, and absolute control. Louis wore them with such confidence, such radiant authority, that the entire court felt compelled to imitate him, for in a world governed by hierarchy and spectacle, failing to follow the king's fashion meant risking political isolation. Thus began the empire of the white wig, a phenomenon so widespread and so influential that it consumed every corner of aristocratic life. White, the color of purity, brilliance, and celestial light, became the signature tone of the royal aesthetic, and every nobleman of ambition rushed to adopt it. Wigs grew larger with each passing season, their curls multiplying, their weight increasing, their cost skyrocketing, until wearing one became not only a statement of status, but a physical burden. Some wigs grew so heavy that they strained the neck, forced the wearer to move with exaggerated stiffness, and created a peculiar rhythm of posture that became a symbol of elite suffering, a visible sign that beauty and power were intertwined with pain. Courtiers spent fortunes on wig powder made from ground chalk, bone dust, and expensive perfumes, blending soft whites with hints of silver and pearl, creating a shimmering aura around their heads, an artificial halo meant to mimic the radiance of the Sun King himself. The process of applying the powder was messy, choking, and often unhealthy, as clouds of fine dust filled dressing rooms, irritated eyes, and coated clothing, yet no one dared to complain, for to appear at court without the proper wig was social suicide. Wig makers became powerful figures, keeping the secrets of their clients and dictating the pace of fashion with every new curl and contour. Some designs were so elaborate that they required hours to assemble, and noblemen sat motionless as teams of assistants sculpted their wigs into shapes that defied reason. Louis, aware of his influence, delighted in the grandeur of this trend, reinforcing it through portraits, ceremonies, and daily appearances until the white wig became a royal trademark and an unavoidable requirement of noble identity. What began as a personal insecurity transformed into a spectacle of dominance, an aesthetic regime that reached far beyond France and reshaped the visual identity of European aristocracy. In this strange and extravagant chapter of history, whiteness became not simply a color, but a declaration of loyalty, a symbol of prestige, a shimmering mask worn proudly by men who bent their necks beneath its weight, all in devotion to the dazzling authority of the Sun King. In the dazzling yet perilous world of the late 17th and 18th centuries, when fashion transformed from aristocratic elegance into a theatrical spectacle bordering on madness, Europe witnessed a strange and mesmerizing revolution, a shift so dramatic that it illuminated courts in hues never before seen on the heads of monarchs or nobles. The powdered wig, once defined by its strict and solemn whiteness, suddenly exploded into a palette of soft blues, shimmering silvers, and delicate pastel pinks, turning noble halls into living galleries of color, movement, and quiet danger. Across France and England, the elite abandoned the monochrome purity once imposed by the legacy of Louis XIV and embraced this chromatic rebellion with passionate enthusiasm, seeing in these new shades a chance to signal refinement, eccentricity, and modernity. What began as subtle experimentation soon spiraled into a full-scale fashion frenzy, as aristocrats competed to outshine one another in salons, ballrooms, and courts, each striving for a shade that would make them appear younger, more ethereal, more captivating. Powder, once merely a symbol of discipline and status, now became a visible expression of personality, carefully tinted with mineral pigments, delicate dyes, and perfumed essences mixed by skilled wig makers who treated their craft like alchemy. Some preferred gentle silver tones that shimmered like moonlight, suggesting wisdom wrapped in beauty, while others chose faint washes of blue that hinted at elegance and originality, and a bold few embraced soft rose hues that framed their faces with a dreamlike radiance, transforming them into living paintings. But behind this aesthetic wonder lurked a constant and terrifying risk, for the powders used to create these colors were not only messy and volatile, they were highly flammable, and in crowded halls illuminated by hundreds of candles, danger hovered constantly in the air. Historical accounts describe moments when the powder suspended in the atmosphere ignited with sudden flashes, turning a simple gesture near a flame into an accident, when curls or powdered strands burst into fire, forcing panicked attendants to smother the flames with bare hands or heavy fabrics. Though such incidents were whispered about more than openly discussed, everyone knew they happened, and yet no one abandoned the trend, for the allure of a beautifully tinted wig, glowing gently in candlelight, was too powerful. Nobles walked through halls trailing faint clouds of colored dust, each movement releasing a subtle mist that clung to clothes, skin, and air, covering everything in a fine layer of pastel shimmer. Servants spent hours brushing, reapplying, tinting, and adjusting these wigs, blending hues with meticulous care, transforming the act of grooming into a kind of performance art. Portrait painters eagerly captured this trend, painting aristocrats with hair that resembled delicate blossoms or drifting clouds, immortalizing a moment in history when fashion no longer obeyed reason but celebrated extravagance with unashamed pride. The color revolution was not merely a stylistic shift, it was a cultural statement, a declaration that beauty could be whimsical, daring, and even dangerous. And so, in the courts of France and England, where art and vanity danced hand in hand, the pastel-powdered wig became a symbol of an age that shimmered brightly, even as it flirted constantly with fire. By the end of the 17th century, Europe entered a turbulent chapter that later came to be known as the Powder Wars, a period when wigs grew so extravagant, so costly, and so saturated with meaning that they ignited a quiet but powerful hatred in the hearts of ordinary people. While monarchs and high-born nobles wandered through gilded halls with towering powdered creations shimmering above their heads, peasants starved in villages where bread was scarce and work paid little, and the contrast became unbearable. The upkeep of a single aristocratic wig, with its meticulous curling, constant perfume baths, lavish powders, and endless repairs, could match the yearly income of a skilled artisan, a reality that spread through the streets like wildfire, fueling resentment and transforming hair itself into a symbol of oppression. Monarchs spent fortunes on maintaining the shine, color, and majestic volume of their so-called royal clouds, enormous constructions sculpted from horsehair, silk, and imported powders, dusted with perfumes and minerals that cost more than entire livestock herds, and every appearance they made in public carried the same unspoken message that their beauty and their grandeur were built upon the suffering of those who had nothing. The common people watched with bitterness as nobles walked through palaces, leaving shimmering trails of powder behind them, their heads glowing under candlelight like celestial beings, their wigs so tall and so heavy that servants supported them discreetly during ceremonies. And the peasants, who struggled to survive winter, felt as if they were looking at creatures from another world. Stories spread, whispered in taverns and market squares, tales of nobles who spent more on powder in a single evening than a family could earn in months, of aristocrats who demanded new wigs for every feast, every ball, every political event, as though hair had become a kind of currency, a signature of cold luxury. Powder, once simply a fashion tool, now carried the stench of injustice, for every sparkling curl represented the gap between those who feasted and those who begged for scraps. Pamphlets and satires circulated, mocking powdered nobles as empty, fragile, absurd, their wigs likened to mountains of stolen wealth, their beauty depicted as grotesque excess. And although such texts were officially forbidden, they flourished in secret, fueling anger and uniting the people in silent defiance. In the shadows of cities and villages alike, resentment simmered, a quiet but relentless fire that grew hotter with each new display of aristocratic vanity. Even minor nobles felt the pressure to participate, spending more than they could afford just to appear respectable, trapped in a fashion war that devoured their income and deepened class divides. The powder wars were not fought with swords or soldiers, but with glances, gossip, satire, and contempt, a cultural battle between magnificent illusion and grim reality. And as shimmering clouds drifted above the heads of the rich, the poor saw in them not beauty, but arrogance, cruelty, and a reminder that the world they lived in belonged to others. This unspoken conflict, born from hair and powder, foreshadowed greater storms to come, for when luxury becomes unbearable to witness, revolution is never far behind. In the extravagant world of the 18th century, the era shaped and defined by the dazzling presence of Marie Antoinette, women's hairstyles ceased to be mere adornments and evolved into towering architectural wonders, theatrical masterpieces that rose above the heads of their wearers like monuments of ambition, artistry, and excess. These creations, often reaching nearly 1 full meter in height, transformed noblewomen into living stages upon which ships, fortresses, pastoral landscapes, mythological symbols, and elaborate sculpted scenes dramatically unfolded, each hairstyle telling a story, declaring a statement, or commemorating an event with breathtaking flamboyance. Powdered in shimmering whites and soft bluish grays, glowing under candlelight like frost-kissed sculptures, these coiffures became the ultimate expression of elite identity, turning every ball, every feast, every royal procession into a spectacular parade of human monuments. Skilled hairdressers, part artists, part engineers, built these towering constructions using pads, wire frames, horsehair cushions, ribbons, silk, wax, and endless layers of powder, securing every curl and ornament with such precision that the entire structure could withstand the slightest breeze, yet collapse instantly if touched or shaken with too much force. Women would sit for hours as their hair was twisted, pinned, lifted, and molded, enduring discomfort, numbness, and the slow ache of weight pulling against the scalp, all in the name of fashion, beauty, and the relentless desire to dazzle. Some coiffures commemorated naval victories with fully rigged miniature ships sailing across waves sculpted from powdered curls, while others showcased elaborate towers resembling miniature fortresses or pastoral gardens complete with artificial flowers, delicate birds, and figurines depicting allegorical scenes. The hair itself became a stage, a world, a spectacle, and women moved through palaces like living sculptures, their heads crowned with fantasies that blurred the line between reality and art. Yet, beneath the shimmering beauty lay constant challenges, for the towering height and immense weight made everyday movement difficult, forcing many women to carry their necks stiffly, to turn their whole bodies instead of their heads, and to navigate doorways sideways like fragile masterpieces that must not be disturbed. Even sleep became a complicated ritual, as lying down would crush the delicate architecture painstakingly crafted earlier in the day, and so many noblewomen learned to sleep sitting upright, supported by pillows and special chairs, drifting into uncomfortable slumber while guarding their hair like priceless treasures. The powder that coated these monumental styles, drifting through the air in pale clouds of scented dust, created an aura of ethereal unreality around the elite, further separating them from the common people who watched in disbelief, resentment, or awe. At grand balls, candles flickered against the soft pastel tones of the coiffures, creating halos of light that transformed the aristocracy into ghost-like figures, drifting through music and laughter like animated statues. Painters immortalized these extravagant visions, capturing the shimmering curves, the impossible heights, and the dreamlike colors, ensuring that the hairstyles of the 18th century would be remembered as some of the most audacious creations in the history of fashion. Under the reign of Marie Antoinette, hair ceased to be human, became architecture, and transcended its biological purpose to embody a world where beauty demanded sacrifice, where art ruled over comfort, and where identity rose, quite literally, toward the sky. In the opulent yet deeply troubling world of early modern Europe, where beauty was elevated to ritual and appearance was treated as a symbol of divine authority, the grand illusion of powdered wigs and perfumed hair concealed a reality far darker and far more dangerous than anyone at court dared to admit. Beneath those towering constructions of curls, ribbons, powders, and wax, a secret ecosystem thrived, one made not of elegance but of parasites, foul odors, and toxic substances capable of slowly destroying the very nobles who flaunted these elaborate creations. Fleas and other small pests took shelter deep within the warm, dense layers of wigs, feeding on the sweat and skin of their aristocratic hosts, multiplying in places no comb could reach, turning royal heads into miniature battlegrounds of constant itching and discomfort. Courtiers scratched discreetly with jeweled fingernails, masks of polite smiles hiding the torment beneath their powdered crowns, knowing that to acknowledge the infestation would shatter the carefully maintained illusion of refinement. To combat the odors created by sweat, heat, and parasites, nobles drenched their wigs and natural hair in aromatic oils, thick mixtures of rose, lavender, amber, musk, and citrus, creating an intoxicating cloud of perfume around them, a scent so dense it clung to clothing, corridors, and entire rooms. Yet, beneath the sweetness lurked the sour base of decay, for no amount of fragrance could fully mask the rot that accumulated inside wigs that were rarely washed, rarely dismantled, and often worn for weeks without proper cleaning. Even more frightening were the dyes and powders used to achieve the fashionable tones of the age, for the shimmering whites, soft blues, delicate silvers, and pastel pinks were created using ingredients such as lead, mercury, arsenic, and other poisonous minerals. These substances seeped into the scalp, entered the bloodstream, and attacked the nervous system, causing headaches, trembling hands, failing vision, pale skin, tooth decay, and in some tragic cases, slow and irreversible poisoning that physicians of the era could not explain. Courtiers fainted during balls, blamed for delicate nerves, when in truth their bodies were simply overwhelmed by toxins. Some lost hair entirely and wore wigs not out of vanity but out of necessity, hiding the damage that the very fashion they loved had inflicted on them. The more flamboyant the style, the greater the risk, for the powders had to be reapplied constantly, creating clouds of dust that filled the air at every gathering, settling onto food, into lungs, and across skin. Servants suffered even more, inhaling these toxic clouds daily as they powdered wigs, cleaned chambers, or prepared mixtures for their masters, all while receiving none of the prestige that the deadly beauty bestowed upon the aristocracy. The courts, glittering under candlelight, seemed to glow with immaculate splendor, yet the glow itself was born from dangerous chemicals and desperate attempts to hide decay and infestation. In this paradoxical world, royal beauty became both a crown and a curse, a dazzling mask that hid the slow, silent march of poisoning, a luxurious facade that shimmered brightly even as it consumed those who wore it. The aristocracy endured the pain, the danger, and the rot, believing that the illusion of perfection was worth any price, even if that price was their own health, dignity, or life itself. In the turbulent aftermath of the Great French Revolution, when crowns toppled, palaces burned, and the very meaning of power was rewritten in blood and fire, the extravagant powdered wig, once the proud emblem of aristocratic majesty, transformed overnight into a hated symbol of oppression, decadence, and the cruel distance between rulers and the ruled. The shimmering white clouds that had floated above the heads of kings, queens, courtiers, and noblemen for more than a century suddenly became dangerous relics, reminders of a world that had collapsed under the weight of its own excess, a world swept away by the roar of revolutionaries who saw in every curl, every ribbon, every scented puff of powder the arrogance of those who had ignored the suffering beneath their feet. As the 18th century gave way to the 19th, monarchy itself struggled to survive, and those royal figures who remained understood with chilling clarity that fashion was no longer a harmless luxury, but a declaration of political identity. The colossal wigs that once proclaimed divine authority were now viewed as grotesque masks, disguises of those who believed themselves above the people, and any monarch foolish enough to appear in one risked humiliation, outrage, or worse. The shift was swift and absolute. Powdered hair vanished from courts, elaborate architectural coiffures were dismantled, and the enormous white constructions that had dominated ballrooms and throne rooms were quietly buried in attics and storage chambers, treated almost like cursed artifacts from a defeated era. Monarchs of the 19th century sought legitimacy not through spectacle, but through restraint, trading the towering symbols of former grandeur for the newfound dignity of natural hair, even when that hair betrayed age, stress, or worry. Gray strands, once concealed beneath layers of powder and perfume, became marks of seriousness, wisdom, and responsibility, a visual reminder that rulers now wished to appear human, grounded, sober, and deeply aware of the changing world around them. The public welcomed this transformation, seeing in the disappearance of the artificial white clouds a victory for common sense and equality. Courts across Europe adopted a quieter aesthetic, one that favored moderation over magnificence, honesty over illusion, substance over appearance. Servants who had once spent hours sculpting curls and applying powders found themselves without work. Wigmakers who had enjoyed immense prestige saw their craft reduced to novelty and theater. And the markets that had thrived on dyes, minerals, powders, and perfumes collapsed as quickly as they had risen. The fall of the wig was not simply a fashion shift. It was a symbolic funeral for an entire worldview, a final acknowledgement that beauty, when used as a weapon of separation and arrogance, leads inevitably to downfall. In the new century, with its wars, revolutions, industrial miracles, and social upheavals, there was no place for powdered illusions. Natural hair, whether dark, fair, or fully silver, became the new crown, honest and unadorned, marking the beginning of a world in which leaders were expected to appear not untouchable but accountable, not celestial but earthly. Thus ended the age of white clouds, an era of dazzling brilliance and quiet poison, leaving behind a legacy as fragile as luminous and as doomed as the powder that once drifted through candlelit halls.